do some introductory remarks. Leslie, take it away.
Thanks, everyone. I'm letting the train scoot on by there for a second. Thank you for joining us this evening for the final round of public outreach meetings in association with this project. I'm Leslie Alley. I'm the Executive Director of the French Market Corporation. In embarking on this effort, the French Market sought to explore new ways to invest in the market that support local culture bearers and advance the city's cultural economy. To assist us in this effort, we have engaged a team of local civic-minded experts to work with us and our community stakeholders to produce a plan that will result in positive changes to the market's facilities, its operations, and its practices. So leading this discussion again tonight are our team from Concordia Architects, led by Baha Javadi, market expert and New Orleans native Richard McCarthy, and outreach coordinator and cultural liaison extraordinaire, Ms. Lynetta Gilbert. So tonight's exercise is focused on sharing what we've learned from you to this point, presenting ideas generated from these conversations, ensuring that we've accurately captured your input as we finalize this report, and then planning a path forward for implementing these ideas. So we want to thank you again for making time to join us here tonight. And then I look forward to speaking with you all again in the future as we start to implement these ideas. So now I'm going to turn it over to Baha so we can get started. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Leslie. So I know some of you have joined us before and already know what the project is about and about our process, but I'm just going to briefly fill everyone in on the project overview and goals, and then give you an overview of our process thus far. So the project goals have been to envision a French market that supports local culture bearers and advances the city's cultural economy, to develop programming and operations that serve the local public and promote sustainable tourism, and to identify short, medium, and long-term capital investments at French Market. So today's agenda, again, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the process, the engagement process. Then we will share some preliminary recommendations around policy, programs, and place that came about based on the feedback that we heard from a variety of stakeholder groups. And after each category of recommendations, we will be asking you if these ideas align with your vision for the French market. We'll close tonight's session with a call to action so you can know how you can stay engaged with this work, and we'll have a brief Q&A at the end. So if you have questions that come up during the session, feel free to just type them in the chat, and we'll keep track of them and address them as best we can at the end of the meeting. So just to ground you on what area we have been focusing on for the study, we're looking at the farmers and flea shed between Ursuline and Barrack Street, and French Marketplace and North Peters, as well as the adjacent outdoor plaza. So everything that's outlined in red on the screen here. We started this study by first looking at past studies that have been led by organizations like Project for Public Spaces, and identifying key insights from those studies that are still relevant today. We've built on those insights with ideas from stakeholders and comparable market models in order to put together an updated series of recommendations for the French market moving forward. In addition to this research and analysis, our stakeholder engagement has been an essential part of our process. So at the top of the year, we held 2 initial rounds of engagement sessions with different stakeholder groups. So this included virtual sessions, it included a couple in-person sessions at the French market sheds to engage vendors and tenants. It included surveys, as well as a number of one-on-one conversations. The first round of meetings focused on culture and mission. Then we looked at programming and operations, and tonight we'll be discussing the preliminary recommendations and visioning around the facilities at the French market. We'll be culminating this work in a final recommendations report that will be published on the French market's website and distributed to anyone who participated in the process. So all of it will be there for you to see and continue to provide feedback on when you get a chance to review it. So this work starts and ends with people. In the first round of engagement, we heard from over 100 stakeholders, and we heard a lot of common themes in that meeting. So some of the common themes included providing a variety through pop-ups and collaborations with other markets, to serve visitors, locals, and engage families and youth through events and activities, to highlight the French market's history and culture through educational programming, and to prioritize local New Orleanians and equity. Some of the same folks who participated in the first round came back and joined us for the second round to build on some of those initial ideas, and some new voices joined the conversation as well. So this graph to the right shows some of the most frequently mentioned programmatic ideas. So this included prioritizing vendor support programs, live performances, and kids activities. There was a focus on developing event-based programs to activate the space more regularly, and to improve the market's infrastructure so that a variety of program ideas can be implemented. So we have a number of these polls sprinkled throughout tonight's session that George Silvertooth will be facilitating. So George, you can take it away. Thanks.
Thanks, Baha. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. So this first poll is the first of 4 that we have. This one's pretty simple. We just want to hear if you've participated in either of the rounds, whether you're a vendor and participated in person, or you participated in any of the virtual engagement. So super easy yes or no question. I'll leave this open for a little bit. You should see a pop-up if you're on your computer. If not, if you're having some kind of trouble, feel free to answer in the chat box. But I'm seeing some good input here. We have about 4 more people who haven't voted. So I'll leave it open for about 5 more seconds. Okay. So it's actually pretty even. I will share these results. So it looks like 57% of people who are in this meeting have participated and 43 have not. So that's, a pretty even split. So definitely thank you guys who participated before for joining us again. We're really excited about what we're presenting tonight, but also for the new people, we're so happy to have you here in this really important stage. So thanks for coming, and Baha, back to you.
Thank you, George. Okay. So our public markets expert, Richard McCarthy, is going to share some of the recommendations around policy and programs, starting with the theory of change around this work. So Richard, why don't you take it away from here?
Thanks, Baha, and hello, everyone. Great to see some familiar faces and some new ones. For those of you who are very familiar with managing markets, or you experience them, one of the things that is evident is that markets are precariously difficult to manage and to balance. And when they're under pressure, whether it is pressure from trying to be all things to all people, or trying to manage the influx of visitors in particular tourists, which has been the scenario at the French market for really the last 35, 40 years, it does set the market into, being adrift. And as a result, you really have to sort of reclaim the steering currents so as to keep put the market back on course. And maybe Baha, if you can maybe set this in motion. What we've got is imagery that is based on the feedback that we got from so many of you. Is we propose a very simple idea that a market is like a flower. It can live, it can die. It's got to be rooted in place, and most specifically rooted in the idea that it creates the conditions for people to succeed. And once we do that, then it results in serving the public good, something that a public market needs to do. So we have this theory of change that we propose for the French market, not just to be a slogan that's painted somewhere, but to be what gets integrated into new activities as well as old activities. And it's integrated very much consumer facing, sort of thinking about the experience of the consumer, the internal consumer as well as the external, so that the market is moving forward. And as a theory of change, that does reinforce the idea that things are going to be changing. And in order to change them, you need to have buy-in and an integration into the leadership of the market. And I think if we maybe move to the next one, and this really gets down to the the leadership structure. And by no means is this to suggest that we just go after the new bright and shiny objects. You've got to reinforce what works, the old, the existing, in order to improve those services. So you begin to look at maybe this multitasking of building the capacity of the staff to be able to grow new opportunities, to develop new sort of muscle memory, to be a good partner, especially with culture bearers, and in order to experiment, to try new things, and that those new things don't just hang out there like a leaf on a flower, but they get integrated back into the whole culture of the organization. So there's that feedback loop. Meanwhile, that provides the existing staff to really improve its internal customer services, whether this is bathrooms. We know that bathrooms are the way you win your heart back, the heart to consumers, especially in the French Quarter. But developing the bathrooms to accommodate, the very international, culturally diverse vendor base. So showers for the ceremonial wudu for Muslim vendors, a shipping depot, floor drains in the food shed that had been meant to have been done, ages ago. And then I think if you get to maybe the next slide, you can see that how we integrate this is by implementing new policies. And as I think you'll see from later in the meeting about some of the physical changes, this isn't all going to happen overnight. This will happen in stages. And so some of those early stages are updating the software for managing vendor space allocation and developing different strategies to create a more open and inclusive product mix, as well as to provide technical help so that the vendors in the market succeed. And if you've been in these meetings or some of the conversations over the last few months, it is unequivocal that the French market's brand, its legacy, its identity is of course related to food, even though food and as a central hub of regional farmers and fishers has
We might have lost Richard.
Richard, are you still there? We can't hear you.
15 years ago.
Oh, there you are.
Nope.
Okay.
Did I disappear? Okay.
You disappeared for a second.
Okay. Having established one of the weekly farmers market experiments over the last 15, 20 years back in 2004, it was a struggle. This build it and they will come model is a struggle in a location that is difficult to get to. And so what we're recommending, and we'll go into this in a few moments, is to stage pop-ups in the open air space and think of that as an incubator for innovation, and partner with those who are also developing some of the new models so as to mitigate some of the risk, not just invite farmers and hope shoppers come and promote, but hope. Instead, maybe to develop some much more targeted strategies, and that this experimentation gets, we learn from it and we repeat, we learn, and it shapes what becomes the norms in the market moving forward.
Thanks, Richard. So, we recognize that was, a lot of information thrown at y'all, but we want to just get a quick feel, vibe check, if you will, to see if what we just talked about aligns with what everybody in this room is thinking for the way to move forward with the policy for the French market. So I'm going to share another poll here, and you'll see a range of options from absolutely they align to mostly, to neutral, to not really, to not at all. And while you think about that, I'll reiterate that we have a survey at the end. So if you feel like you need a little bit more time to think, or you want to clarify your answers, that's a great space to do it. If you have some quick thoughts, feel free to put them in the chat box right now. But we have these questions again in the survey with a spot to elaborate on everything. But we just wanted to see what people thought in the heat of the moment right after the information was presented. So I'm seeing about 7 or so people have voted. So I'm going to give it a little bit more time. Great, got another one. There we go. Got a few more. Excellent. Great. Just give it about 10 more seconds. See if there's any other votes. Okay, I'm going to end that and share the results. So we have 36% for absolutely and mostly. We have 18% with neutral and 9% with not really. So that's great news for us, that it's mostly on the affirmative side. But we, like I said, definitely if you want to clarify some of your thoughts, throw them in the chat box, and we'll have that survey at the end so you could really dive deep with your thoughts. Back to you, Richard.
Okay, thanks, George. Guess we get to maybe the next slide. Yeah, and I'm seeing some of the chat in the box. Anne in particular, and Aaron, you've reinforced this whole question of of course the French market.
Richard, we lost you again, your audio. Richard, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, now we hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm being told I'm unstable, or at least my internet is. I see some of the chats regarding the whole question about serving a neighborhood in a neighborhood that has experienced such dramatic demographic shifts. This really does point to the question that the market can't just sit there and then look around and see who comes. It is going to take a programmatic posture to really engage in community organizing, in curating culture in partnership with the community who finds it reason enough to come to the French market. We know the tourists, when we have them, they'll breeze through. But how can we reposition the market to have different audiences at different times? And maybe if we go to the next slide, we can begin to see what this looks like. So there's the issue of relationships and trust with community partners, especially culture bearers. But there's also the question of how do we animate and manage the placemaking in the market. One of the sort of clearest commands that have come through the early studies, as well as these last few months,
Richard, you just went out again, so whenever you come back on, you might have to repeat yourself. Oh, there, no, I hear you now.
You hear me now? Oh, I'm sorry, this is so dodgy. The kinds of programmatic pop-ups should be organized around clustering this kind of placemaking so that you have sitting and learning and selling all taking place within a close proximity. That creates that kind of magic chemistry of public spaces. So what I mean by this, maybe if you can go to the next slide, Baha, assuming you can hear me, yeah, is that the fact that the sitting, many of you said that one reason they do enjoy coming to the French market is just to sit and soak in the vibe, watch the people. Well, you don't want to be watching them afar afield. You want to be cloistered next to other activity. Now, this is post-COVID, pre-COVID, mid-COVID, you know.
We lost you again, Richard.
Activity, and there's learning that goes on. This is where our culture bearers come in. There's so much information to share. But there's also got to be the hustle and bustle of selling. So if we develop these activities, maybe go to the next slide, because I think the sit.
Richard, we lost you again, and perhaps it might be a good idea for you to turn your camera off. It'll probably help with your connection a little bit. Hey, Richard, can you hear us?
Are you having problems with the internet?
Oh, we can hear you now,
We can
Richard.
hear you. You're back.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Yeah, Richard, a suggestion maybe that could help with your connection is if you turn your camera off, it might help with your connection a little bit.
That's true. That is true. I'll stop my video. You can hopefully hear my voice. Maybe if you can move to the next slide, Baha. So if we begin to look at the year at a glance of what kinds of activities, there are, you know, and this is speaking to some of the existing events. So, and this is just a glimpse of what can be. By no means should you be looking for is my event there, the issues I care about, but these are suggestions, sort of a way to start the conversation. Is what we're looking at is the peaks and the troughs of a year in the market. There are existing festivals that reach large audiences. There's no sense trying to put more things on top of those existing successful, beloved festivals. But what we can do in between is begin to stage seasonal products that are available and provide those during those peak seasons so that people begin to recognize that, oh, I can get my Christmas tree at the market, pumpkins at the market, crawfish during Lent, and then stage and pep.
Richard, we lost you again. It might make sense. I can probably try to take it from here since you're going in and out.
Am I back?
You're back now. So why don't you give it another go, and if you go out again, I'll just take it from there.
Okay. So what you see here is the calendar year at a glance. What we're wanting to show here is that there are peaks and troughs to the rhythm of markets. And in these peaks, those are the existing French market festivals. We don't want to compete with those. Those attract large numbers, and they're far more difficult to have these sort of smaller, discrete sell, and learn experiences. We want to utilize those troughs to re-engage with locals by establishing these seasonal specials that are there for 6 weeks, a month, and then pepper in between during off-peak hours, discrete events, 4 to 6 hours, 2-day events that provide the French market's new posture of curating cultural partnerships, community organizing with authentic voices from the community, intentionally to serve local audiences, so that this becomes a place for building local social cohesion between those of us who live there. So maybe we get to the next slide, you can see what some of these may look like. Assuming I'm still here. So like at a month at a glance, you can see in the green, in green, those are the peak market days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We would by no means suggest running the pop-ups during those times because the market's full, it's difficult to park. Instead, you move to the pop-ups, maybe the next slide. And you begin to see that during the day and at the night, there's different rhythm of who comes through the market. If there are student tour groups coming through in the morning and it's, looking an architectural tour, scavenger hunt in the market. During the midday, there may be more tourists, but at night we can run a night market. These pop-up events, whether it's related to food or rather, serious subjects like water mitigation and stormwater. These kinds of events mean that we begin to create a culture of where the market has ships passing in the night. Over time, I think you can see, from the next slide, over time, you begin to see that these lines also start to blur, and you begin to see this interesting intervention between locals and visitors, between different age groups, different neighborhoods descending upon the market. And that means that from a marketing standpoint and how the market is managed and managing some of this chaos, you see maybe in the next slide, this idea of managing the ships passing in the night. Too often the French market's under the pressure to market as broadly, as widely as possible. And if instead, coming back to the theory of change, we begin to identify target audiences at discrete moments in time, it means that the market can serve different audiences at different times. And this provides space to develop some real partnership with local bearers of our culture. So maybe I'll stop there since I'm still getting through and not freezing up.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Richard. So we have, it's the exact same question for this one as well. So it's the same range of things. And so, just in summary, what these programs are about is creating pop-ups, creating seasonal things to, bring more people into the market, whether it's locals or tourists. But it's also about, who are those pop-ups? Who are the, what jobs are we creating for the community with all of this? And I hope I think Richard did a great job of conveying the variety of that, whether it's educational or just for fun or for shopping or for all of these things based in that sit, learn, and sell. So I see a few good people voting. I'm gonna leave it open for a little bit longer. Cool, great. About 10 more seconds. Okay, I think that's about everyone. I'm gonna share the results here real quick. So this one is more on the absolutely side with 64%, and then 27 at mostly, and 9% at neutral. So great, thank you everyone. That's really great news for us to hear. Yeah, if you have any questions or any other thoughts, please put them in the chat box. I see that we're getting a couple, and I just want to acknowledge that we're not ignoring you. We'll answer them at the end of the presentation. All right, Baha, over to you.
Thanks, George. So now we're going to look at how some of these programmatic and policy ideas might manifest in the physical space of the market sheds and that outdoor plaza. So we'll be showing you a few conceptual images that illustrate some of these ideas. I want everyone to know that these images, these ideas are not set in stone, but rather meant to help us envision and visualize how the physical space might be transformed. So we're going to be looking at these ideas in the short, medium, and long term. So starting with the short term, these are sort of low-hanging fruit ideas that we have the capacity to implement within the first year of action. So I know that the French Market leadership is actively working with the mayor's office to secure funding and resources to get started on some of these ideas. So some of these ideas include incorporating more public art to make the French Market sheds more welcoming and colorful. So you might imagine a mural along the flood wall to activate North Peters more for pedestrians. You might also imagine a kind of ground mural that threads through the whole market space and resembles the Mississippi River. So we can start to think of that as a wayfinding opportunity or an opportunity for some geographic storytelling. We're also showing some flexible seating that can be arranged in a variety of ways depending on the program and activation for that day. Something else that we heard from a lot of folks is that the bathrooms, there's a strong desire to improve and expand the bathrooms. So one approach to how we might do that is to build out a mezzanine space directly above the existing bathrooms and existing French Market office, allowing for more space on the ground floor to expand the public restrooms, and perhaps repurposing the existing French Market office right here to be more of a visitor's center and shipping kiosk, and then moving the French Market offices to this mezzanine floor right here. So that's an example of a capital investment that we might immediately implement to have some immediate transformations at the market. We also heard from a lot of folks that they want to see some kind of transportation hub at the French Market. So you can see here on the corner of Barracks and North Peters, we're showing a bike depot station for bike parking and where you might find tools to service your bike. And that kind of continues to support some of this really cool bike path infrastructure that has recently been installed around the French Market. We're also showing using this existing fire lane right here on the Barrack Street side as a rideshare hub. So putting up some signage and designating this zone as a pickup drop-off area for rideshare cars and pedicabs, and incorporating signage and informational kiosks on this side as part of the wayfinding strategy. So really starting to treat this Barrack Street side of the market as an entrance to the market rather than what it kind of feels like now, which is back of house. And then again, Richard mentioned this as he was talking about programming, but viewing this outdoor plaza area as a kind of flex space to host seasonal events, festivals, pop-up activities. So you might start to imagine some of the ideas that we heard from you all in the last couple meetings like having some kind of farmer's market or fresh food box distribution on that end, or youth markets. There's a long list of ideas that you all shared with us. So having an area, a designated area that can be transformed to meet all of those needs could be a place to start to experiment and test out and be a visible spot for people to engage with. We're also showing a couple parklets right here on French Marketplace, adjacent to these brick and mortar businesses across the street. So that's kind of a nod to the new parklet program through the city of New Orleans that some of these adjacent businesses might choose to participate in. So for those of you who don't know, a parklet is a parking space sized park. So it's a mini park where you'll find seating, sometimes planting and lighting. So you can imagine activity and people start to spill over across the street and use these sort of parklet elements and vice versa. So you have this kind of symbiotic relationship between the adjacent brick and mortar businesses and the French Marketplace. So the medium term, so these are some of these ideas that build on the short-term ideas. These are things that might happen in more of the 1 to 3 year realm. So looking at some bigger capital investment ideas, like incorporating some electrical and sound infrastructure to build a multi-purpose platform out in the plaza area that might be used for performances during special events and festivals. It might be used as a storytelling corner. It might also just be used as seating and a place to plug in your phone when it's not being used for a special programming element. We also heard from folks that they want to see more green infrastructure at the French Market. So here we're showing solar panels mounted to the south-facing roof of the existing market shed. We're also looking at perhaps upgrading some of the existing fabric screens that you see along the perimeter of the French Market sheds to be more rigid glass garage doors, so that you have a more rigid protection against wind-driven rain and the elements. And finally, in the long term, so these are more aspirational ideas that would require some more substantial planning and resources. But things like perhaps we build a third shed on top of this pop-up flexible plaza area to protect it further from the elements and make it useful year-round, just like the other two sheds. Another idea is, we heard from folks that they want to see more interactive and playful elements throughout the market. So incorporating some kind of interactive water feature like a splash pad for kids and families in the plaza. Some of you may have noticed that the French Market over the past few months has been piloting a pedestrian program in the first block adjacent to the farmer's shed on French Marketplace, where they've been temporarily closing off that block to through traffic and preserving it for pedestrians only, and having tables and chairs out there. So in the long term, we might imagine making that a permanent fixture and installing bollards at the intersection of Governor Nichols and French Marketplace, but still allowing loading and service traffic to come through this first block and be able to turn onto Governor Nichols.
Awesome. Thank you, Baha. So we're going to run it back one more time. Final question for the evening. Same question, same answers. but for what Baha just presented. So, you know, the short to long-term physical improvements. So like she said, you know, none of this is set in stone. This is just based on, you know, what we heard from the first rounds of community engagement, you know, what we feel like is feasible in the short term, which again is within 12 months is the goal, medium term, 1 to 3 years, long term, closer to 5. But we, you know, we hope that it's, you know, just constant continual improvements. You know, even one of the good ideas I felt like we heard this morning when we did a in-person vendor meeting was the art mural. Maybe could it include artists from the French market that are already working there, since they have the stake in it and have for, you know, decades, some of them. So, you know, there's still a lot of really awesome potential to explore. Still gonna wait for a few more votes. Looks like we're getting them in. And last, you know, I'll remind everybody again, you'll have a chance to fill out that survey and elaborate on your thoughts there, as well as the Q&A when we wrap up, which is super soon. Great. All righty, give about 5 more seconds. Any last voters? Okay. All right, so this one's even Stevens, 33, 33, 33. So that's great. That's I love when things align like that. So thank you everyone for voting in these quick polls, and we'll share that survey at the end of the meeting so that you can elaborate a little bit more. All right, Baha.
Thank you, George. And I want to encourage folks to, you know, if you didn't see something that you expected to see or that you wanted to see, or you saw something that felt weird or didn't align, please let us know in the chat or in the survey, like George mentioned at the end, because we want to work to refine this vision as much as we can, so it's reflective as possible, as all of our stakeholder groups imagine. So, you know, in that spirit, this process starts and ends with people. So we want to share with you not just next steps that you can expect from us and the French market, but also next action items that you can do to stay engaged with this work as it moves forward. So the first thing you can do is complete that survey that we're going to be sharing with you in the chat in just a moment. So the survey has 2 parts to it. It doesn't have a lot of questions. It'll just take you a few moments. But the first part of the survey are the same questions that we asked you in the poll, which is, do these recommendations within policy, programs, and place align with your vision and your desires for the French market? It's really important that we hear from you in that first section. The second section is also important. It's an after action report where we ask you how you felt like today's meeting went, what you feel like we could do better next time. We're always looking to improve this process. Next, we want to see you stay engaged. So keep checking the French Market's website for updates. That's where we will be posting the final recommendations report. The French Market is also adding a comment box on their website where you can continue to give us feedback as we progress and when you get a chance to review the report. So please stay in touch. You can also email the French Market staff at feedback@frenchmarket.org. I'll have the email up on the screen on the next slide. And tell your friends and neighbors. We need to spread the word. You know, if we want to transform and help the French market succeed, we want to get local New Orleanians involved. We want to get current and potential vendors involved. We want to get, you know, visitors involved. So please tell all your people about this work. Tell them to check out the website, to check out the report, and let us know what they think. And finally, don't forget to tag the French market with photos of your vision, photos that inspire you, share photos of how you engage with the French market. Up on the screen in the lower right corner here, you can see the French Market's Instagram and Facebook handles. So the Instagram handle is French Market or French MKT NOLA, and the Facebook is French Market New Orleans. So check those out, tag the French Market. And finally, here's that email that I mentioned, feedback@frenchmarket.org if you have additional questions or comments. So we have a few minutes left for Q&A. So I'm going to let Zach Banks moderate the Q&A. Zach, I know you've been keeping track of questions in the chat, so I'll let you take it away from here.
Awesome, thank you, Baha. So I got a few questions. Richard, I saw you going back and forth in the chat box. Thank you for being our quick responder there. So one of the questions that I got was from, sorry, I just lost track of the name, from Ethan Elistad. What is the definition of culture barrier you're using? Is it the Black masking tradition, social aid and pleasure clubs, musicians, neighborhood elders, artists, street performers? Who decides? Great question. And I honestly believe that this is a perfect question for Lynetta to, I don't know if I see Lynetta on the call. Oh, yep, there you are, Lynetta. For Lynetta to go ahead and answer, this is, I feel like that nobody knows this answer better than you.
Thanks. Hi, Ethan. I'm glad you raised the question. We've done extra work to try to engage in the public meetings, all of those groups and, that you enumerated and others, primarily because they have not, they have voiced oftentimes that they felt left out of the market. And then in the actual public sessions, many of them gave ideas for how they might be able to be included. And what was so important is that in a couple of the small group sessions, people said, we really want to do it, to participate, but have it, yes, we would be willing to do pop-ups, but we want it organized. We want to know when we would have the opportunity, dates, times, and we want to be a part of that planning process. So we're trying to be to reach out and extend as much as possible. And in this case, I will use the word inclusive because we are asking these groups to help us design their engagement, not come into what we've already figured out, but to help them be a part of the design process. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Lynetta. So that was really one of the bigger questions that we got and kind of one of the only questions we got. So if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to shoot them in the chat box. No question is too small. One comment that was brought up that Richard actually got to a little bit, but this was brought up by Ann Timmons Harris, excuse me. And it was really questioning the fact that we want to, kind of create an environment that demands folks who create their merchandise to be there at least 5 days a week. And there's a little bit of pushback there. And we hear you, and Richard gave you a brief response. Just kind of saying that it's a great comment because we do have to kind of play to the peaks and valleys of the market, and maybe it won't make sense for everybody to have to be for people that create their craft to be there 5 days a week. And this was actually a comment that came up this morning as well when we showed these visions, the long-term vision that does show an expanded shed. We were questioned, well, what if we don't have the space to fill that shed? What does it become? Is it just dead zone? And that was a great comment. That was something that, we need to consider that option. What if there isn't enough space, or what if there is too much space for not an adequate enough number of vendors? So that was a great comment. It's definitely something that we have to consider, and whether or not that turns into, a larger, oops, sorry, see, we're getting some more questions in there. I see you, Marianne. Whether or not that that becomes reality is up to what you guys say and the vision that the stakeholders share with us. So Marianne Miller, is the information kiosk a means of listing the businesses? Would a software upgrade change also enable access to public who the businesses are? Okay, so I'm going to tackle that information kiosk question kind of first. I think that's kind of the goal. So when you go into a mall, you get an idea of where every store is when you first walk in. And granted, the kiosks do change every day, but I mean, we were in the market this morning and we heard where those assignments were being placed. So if there's already a system for that, why not try to digitalize it and put it on a kiosk that, you know, is very easily accessible and something that everybody can kind of quickly navigate around and understand where their favorite shop might be or where a shop of interest might be. So would a software upgrade change also enable access to the public? I'd imagine so. You know, we would like to try to create as much access as possible. I mean, we talk infrastructure, and in this day and age, infrastructure does mean connection to the internet. It does mean, you know, fast internet speeds as well. So, you know, that is a goal, and that is something that we definitely envision being, you know, something that is kind of an important next step.
Hey,
I don't
Zach.
want to speak for the market.
Hey, Zach, why don't we let Richard kind of speak to some of the vendor software management ideas that we're tinkering with, which might speak to the software question.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, so Zach, you responded to this really well. The software that is used to allocate space to vendors is also tied into a set of policies that I you know, is being referenced in these questions, which is how do I ensure my tenure to be in a certain location to sell a certain set of products. There are now 30 years of the weight of what are approved products, how many of those approved products can be there, even though many of those products are not there on a given day. And there is both the challenge of intent. How do we ensure that there's a flow of new products into the market? How do we also, you know, defend and protect the existing vendors? And how much time does staff spend allocating and then reallocating space? It's not actually a very good use of their talents, where their time could be spent on supporting existing vendors. So we've been looking at what, you know, it's long time for some new software that not only helps to improve the staff time that is devoted to allocating space, but it gives the vendors more control over their space allocation.
Oh no, Richard, it seems like your sound might have cut out.
That's okay. I think he gave it.
Nope.
Am I back?
You're back now, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there could be a dashboard that the vendor has to see where are they going to be. They don't have to queue up like they do now. And it's also a dashboard that the shopper would have to know, who's going to be here today and where are they? And it can be used for promotion. So this kind of transparency is what we're hoping to achieve. And it's, you know, it's long overdue. So hopefully I'm still here.
Yes, we got you, Richard. Thank you for that answer.
I'll stop there.
Well, actually, we're going to swing one more back your way. Ann Timmons-Harris, we do hear you about security. Richard, do you care to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that one of the biggest challenges of running a market, and I think much of what we're describing with this new direction addresses the non-negotiable basis of the market. Preserve the historic buildings and ensure that it is a safe place to buy and sell. And the challenge with that, of course, is we're out in the open. And how do you maintain safety if there are issues of crime or perception of a lack of safety in the market? There's no question that the market is vulnerable to those realities. So a more comprehensive look at the campus of the market with very clear places where there are these clusters of activity that go on does help to make the market safer. Now, I know that sounds Pollyanna-ish, but if there are clusters of people engaged in positive activity, it makes the market safe, and it makes it less attractive if you're involved with antisocial behavior. Now we're talking about expanding the hours of the market, which will put additional pressures on making sure that the market is a safe space. On the other hand, I know this from running markets and working with markets around the world, is that if you have a cluster of people gathering together, it makes the place safer. So the security guards, I mean, there's a role for security to ensure public safety. There's also the role of the market being more vibrant and full of life that will push out antisocial behavior. But I do think this speaks to also the training of this theory of change, working all the way from the top to the bottom, to security, to space allocation. There's going to have to be, a real sort of new calibration of how to do this. I'd also say that there's a lot that is put on the market for the entire French Quarter safety and the surrounding regions. And that, I think, is also part of the conversations of how to coordinate that better so that the market isn't all on its own by itself, having to sort of fend off. But, more families in the market will make the market safer. More activities during peak hours and not peak hours will make it safer. But I certainly hear you. There's nothing that will undermine sales than a perception of a lack of safety.
Thank you for that, Richard. That was Ann Timmons. I hope we got to you, Ann Timmons Harris, but hope that answered your question. Baha, I'm going to swing it your way. That was the last question we had in the chat box.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Zach. And thank you everyone for participating tonight. We're ending right on time. We really wanted to honor everyone's time and keep this meeting to an hour. So I hope you all have time to make some dinner and be with your families now. But as I said before, we're going to be publishing the final report on the French Market website. We'll be incorporating the feedback that we hear, the additional feedback that we hear from you tonight through the chat, as well as the surveys that you return to us. So please, again, it would be great if you could return those surveys to us as soon as you can, so they make it into the final report. And we'll also be posting a recording of this session tonight on the French Market website, so that people who couldn't join tonight can get a chance to see the presentation. So if you see that up on the site, please share it with your friends and neighbors, so that we can get as many eyes on it as possible. And with that, thank you again so much, and have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. So great to see you all.
Thank you.
We'll see.